Toronto now has more unemployed people than the entirety of Quebec. There are more unemployed people in Toronto than the entire population of Buffalo, and for that matter, Windsor as well. Over 317,000 people who live in the Greater Toronto Area are now unemployed. Now, that is the highest spike of unemployment that Toronto has seen in at least the last 20 years, excluding the pandemic. But when you factor in just how fast Toronto's population has risen over the past 20 years, what we're looking at is a complete and total disaster. So knowing all of that, what could possibly go wrong with bringing in millions of people every single year, who, by the way, mostly end up living in Toronto through Justin Trudeau's open borders mass immigration agenda? Homelessness continues to rise. Food insecurity also continues to rise, along with basically every other bad news metric in this country. So the question then becomes, when is our government going to put the needs of Canadians first and actually help us, instead of continuing to bring in millions of people every single year? But don't forget, because according to Justin Trudeau and his Liberal government, we have a major labor shortage in this country that needs to be filled by bringing in millions of people every single year. Now, for whatever reason, those jobs aren't being filled by the 317,000 unemployed Torontonians, but maybe if we just bring in 500,000 people from India or China, maybe they will find their jobs. I think it goes without mentioning that unemployment is not just rising in Toronto alone, it is of course rising all across the country. But before we get into the show, be sure to drop a like on this video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and the comment question for the episode is this: is it time to shut down Canada's borders and put the needs of Canadians first? Let me know your answer in the comments below, and let's get into it. Toronto unemployment rate hits 317,000. That was the headline coming out of Statistics Canada data just last week. Unemployment has continued to rise across the country, but no more so than in Toronto, a city that represents 1/3 of the increase in unemployment in the month of May. Over just the past year, over 88,000 people in Toronto became unemployed. Toronto's unemployment rate is now 7.9%. Besides Calgary, Canada's two other large cities, Vancouver and Montreal, have a significantly lower unemployment rate. Calgary, which I did not realize, has an over 8% unemployment rate. And actually, the situation is just as bad in southern Ontario cities. Windsor, St. Catharines, and Hamilton all have an unemployment rate above 7%. Windsor is at 8.5%. Now, it may sound crazy to blame this entirely on immigration, but frankly, I don't care because we have the numbers here to prove it. Over the past year, Toronto's working age population increased by over 273,000. So that's the working age population, driven almost entirely by mass immigration. Across the country, Canada's working age population has been rising by 81,000 per month. Okay, think about that. 81,000 people per month who are 15 and older are entering the Canadian labor force. Now, according to Statistics Canada, in order to have zero impact on the unemployment rate in our country, the country would have to be creating 50,000 jobs per month. And last year, Canada was not creating 50,000 jobs on average per month, and we are below that average this year. So something just isn't quite right here. Because for years now, we have been told by the federal government and by immigration ministers that there is a crucial labor shortage that needs to be filled by immigration. We've been told the same thing by corporate lobbyists like the Century Initiative and other business lobbying organizations, that Canadians just don't want to work low-skilled jobs. We're lazy. We're not willing to get our hands dirty, and that's why we need to keep increasing our population. But we have the data in front of us. It shows that none of this is working. There aren't enough homes in this country, and there aren't enough jobs. So what is going to happen to us? What's going to happen to Canadians? We've been sold out. That's the reality. We've been sold out by politicians and by large corporations who are winning easy political victories and stuffing their pockets, in the case of corporations, with an endless supply of cheap foreign labor. Do they care that you will never be able to afford a home and that you won't be able to raise a family to actually solve the demographic problem instead of importing a foreign culture into your country? No, they don't care at all because they're getting rich. because the politicians keep winning. Oh, and when you do eventually come to the conclusion of what this problem is, which is immigration, well, the immigration minister is telling you that he's getting sick and tired of people blaming immigrants for all the problems in this country. I don't think Canadians are necessarily blaming immigrants. I certainly know that they are blaming you, Mark Miller and Justin Trudeau. You're the ones that brought them here in the first place. And their presence, due to your decision-making, has triggered all of these issues. It is really quite unbelievable that the Canadian government expects none of us to recognize what's actually going on. Do they really think that they can just continue to label Canadians who speak out against mass immigration as racist and xenophobic, and that is somehow going to work? That is somehow going to keep blindfolds on Canadians so that we all still remain oblivious to what's going on here? Oh, and to Pierre Poilievre, who thinks that he can just continue to dodge this issue and that it might go away, to continue doing acrobatics and gymnastics to avoid ever even having to say the words mass immigration.
I'm afraid, all right? You want to hear me say it? You want to break me down? All right, I'm afraid.
I'm afraid too.
That time is coming to an end very quickly. The Conservative Party, when they eventually get into power, will have to address this issue head on and do the hard work of saying no more to people entering this country until Canadians are taken care of first. And if they don't, well, it's not going to go well for them. Just look at what's going on in the UK right now. The time is now to address this issue. Either do it or get out of the way and let someone who isn't afraid, who isn't scared of being called names by their political opposition in the media, to do the job. Because I don't know about you, but the idea of voting in a new government led by someone who is too scared to even say the words mass immigration, too scared to tackle the issue of the day in this country because he doesn't want to be called racist, doesn't exactly fill me with excitement and passion. Regardless of whatever happens in the future in this country, regardless of how any government decides to tackle mass immigration in this country, having 317,000 unemployed people in Toronto, the country's economic engine, the place that people have always come to find work, is not a good sign for a government already on the ropes.